Hi, thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk to you about all of my winter book recommendations. So let me tell you how this is going to go before we get started. I have split the 32 books that I have to tell you about into categories. So we have nonfiction, adult thriller, classics, young adult, middle grade, adult fantasy, and adult literary fiction. Those are the categories. Oh, and then I also have a separate category. I think I'll end with these books, which are the books that I have not finished yet or haven't read yet, so my TBR winter books. But I have a lot of TBR winter books, just not ones that I actually own. Also, a little disclaimer, a lot of winter books are also Christmas books. These books that I'm going to tell you about are not Christmas books. There might be one or two that take place like around Christmas time, but their main setting is winter, snow kind of setting, rather than it being centered around Christmas, because Christmas is over. It's January now. We don't need any more Christmas book recs until next year. You know, catch me next year and I'll give you some real good Christmas book recs. But for now, we're focusing on winter, or not even just winter, but cold. We're focusing on cold, I should specify, because some of these books take place in countries or parts of the world where it's always sort of winter, it's always cold. Even in summertime, it's still pretty cold. So this is the cold reading recommendations, cold book recommendations, snow book recommendations, glaciers, mountains, crunching under your feet, cold, white as snow recommendations. So because I have so many, 32 as I said, I'm gonna try to do it pretty quickly. I don't want to sit here and make you sit with me for like 3 hours, because I'm definitely a yapper. I'm gonna try to be concise and quick and not say too much about each book, but you never know. Certified yapper, they're gonna yap. That's just what you're gonna get. So if you want to hang out with me for a little while and get some book recommendations, great. Get something to drink, get a blanket, and settle in, and we're gonna get started. So the first category I'm going to talk to you about is middle grade, which is I would say one of my favorite age ranges to read snowy cold books from. And the first book we're going to talk about is Breadcrumbs by Anne Ursu. Breadcrumbs is about two kids, Hazel and Jack, I think are their names, and it's a modern day fairy tale retelling of The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. So Hazel and Jack are sort of two peas in a pod. They know each other really well. They're best friends. They've been best friends for a really long time. I think they're neighbors too, so they are seeing each other constantly. And then one day Jack just stops talking to Hazel. They just stop talking. They're not friends anymore. He's kind of mean, kind of teaming up with the other people who they used to not ever want to hang out with. She's confused. She's trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And then Jack disappears. One day he goes like into the forest and he's just gone. And Hazel essentially like is trying to find him. And this book is very cold in the sense that most of the novel takes place in a really snowy wilderness setting. Hazel is essentially trying to follow the quote-unquote breadcrumbs left in order to find her best friend and return him to the way that he was before, because when he does start to change and they start to not even grow apart, but it's like kind of a snap thing, like it just happens overnight that he doesn't talk to her anymore and they're not friends. And Hazel has this sensation that this is something magical, something outside of the realm of what is reality. So she's determined to figure out what happened, where Jack went, and how to get him back as her best friend. And it's a really, really lovely book. I highly recommend it. I want to get a physical copy actually, because it was just so wonderful. The next book recommendation I have for you is actually one that I read this month. It's called Leila and the Blue Fox by Keiran Millwood Hargrave, illustrated by Tom DeFreston. I think this was my first 5-star read of the year, and I was surprised because I had never heard of this before. I really hope I'm giving you a new recommendation that you've never heard of. Leila and the Blue Fox, oh my god, this story was so incredible and it's so beautiful inside. It has these gorgeous illustrations on a bunch of pages and they're all blue and white, which is very wintry, of course. Oh, it's so stunning. So Leila and the Blue Fox is about a girl named Leila. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Leila and not Leila, but I think it's Leila. Leila is a Syrian refugee. She and her family had to flee Syria because of the war, and they all fled to, I believe, London, except her mother, because her mother got a job in Norway as a climate scientist. So Leila went with her aunt and her cousin Mona to London, and she lived there, she grew up there, and then her mom went to Norway to work. And so Leila hasn't even seen her mom in years and years and years since she was a little kid, and she feels kind of abandoned by her mom, which makes sense, and she's going through all this trauma from having to flee Syria when she was really, really young. A lot of it she doesn't even remember, but her cousin Mona is 5 or 6-ish years older than her, so she remembers. She's very traumatized, and she's very protective of Leila as well, and so is her aunt. But then Leila gets a message, I guess, from her mom calling for her to come to Norway to see her, and Leila, she's kind of reticent. She doesn't necessarily really want to go, but her mom is sort of insisting that Leila come to Norway. So she gets on a plane by herself. I think she's 12 years old. She gets on a plane by herself with a chaperone. She's really scared to go through customs because she still has a Syrian passport, and she's heard horror stories, and everybody in her family has given her rules to be careful and what to say and what not to say and how to act and what level of eye contact and how you should smile and how, exactly step by step how she should be in front of customs and border patrol when she gets to Norway because of her Syrian passport. And then when she gets to Norway, she learns that her mom is working with a blue fox. This fox has been named Miso. This is based on a real Arctic fox named Miso. And Leila finds out that her mom is tracking this Arctic fox, and the Arctic fox is acting very different from the way most Arctic foxes act in the region, I guess. And so they're following the Arctic fox, essentially, and she sort of along the way grows, learns more about her trauma and what happened to her, because like I said, she doesn't have a lot of memories about it and her time like fleeing Syria. She also learns secrets about her mom, learns about why her mom is in Norway and not in London. She feels really abandoned, and they sort of mend their relationship over the story, which is so beautiful. Like, yes, this is a very snowy book because it's in Norway in the Arctic, and there's lots of glaciers, and they're in a boat, and the boat gets stuck in the ice, and they get off the boat and they have their snowshoes and their skis, and they're following this fox through the icy landscape. It's so, so wonderful, and the illustrations just make it 100,000 times better. Oh my god, it's so good, but it's so much more than that because it's also about the relationship between mother and daughter and how complex it is for immigrants who have to flee their home country and start over completely. It has a lot of commentary, obviously, on climate change because she is a climate scientist, her mother, and it's just such a wonderful book. If you have a chance to pick this up, I really, really recommend it. It's such a good book. The next middle grade winter recommendation I have for you is called Winterhouse by Ben Guterson. This book is in a trilogy, so it's a series, and I would say that this might be one of the less wintry books I have on this middle grade list. However, it's still very wintry, and it's a mystery. Look at this. I really love this hardcover edition because it has like these cutouts in the front, and then it opens to the hotel. So Winterhouse is a hotel, and this book is about an orphan named Elizabeth Summers. Elizabeth lives with her aunt and uncle who don't really like her that much. They're really rude. They're mean. I think Elizabeth is like 12 or 13. That's sort of like the median age of most of these books. And her uncle and aunt kind of hate her. They don't treat her right. And then one day she gets a letter from some mysterious man who says, "Come to Winterhouse." So she goes to Winterhouse. It's a stunning hotel. I don't know if Norbridge Falls is a real place or if it's just a fictional, snowy, cold town. But that's where she goes. She goes to Norbridge Falls, and she finds out so much about her family, her history. She becomes best friends with this boy whose name I cannot remember right now. There are really cute illustrations in this book as well. One of the really fun aspects of this book is that every chapter has a word puzzle. So let me give you an example. Here you go. So chapter 17, preparations for a game, gave, give, five, find. So essentially, and they explain this in the book, that Elizabeth Summers has the kind of brain that is really good at puzzles. So in the book, there's actually a couple people who stand in the hotel like lobby at a huge table doing like a 10,000 piece puzzle for the whole book and the next book and the next book. They're doing this puzzle, and Elizabeth loves to help with the puzzle. And the puzzle also often plays an important role in whatever mystery Elizabeth and her friend are trying to solve. And it's just like a fun element to add to a book. I bet like if I was a kid and I read this, I would find that really, really fun because puzzles are so fun to kids and to adults. Just the same. So that is Winterhouse, and again, this is a trilogy. There's 3 books. This one I would say is the most wintry of the 3. The next book I have is one that you may have heard of from other YouTubers, because I found this book from a YouTuber. This is actually the author of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. She has many, many middle grade novels. I've read 3 or 4 of them at this point. This one is by far my favorite of all of her books, not even just the middle grade. This is Ember and the Ice Dragons. Very snowy, very cold, amazing, amazing book with dragons, specifically ice dragons. We have our main character Ember, who's a dragon. She was a dragon until she got adopted by this magician who put like a spell on her so that she could suppress her dragon tendencies and live with him and with the humans. But the magic seems to be sort of wearing off, and so her adoptive father sends her to live with her mother in the land of the dragons because she's been living in London, and in London she's accidentally like blowing fire from her mouth and has these like dragon tendencies that are just no longer sustainable for her. So she goes to live with her mother in Antarctica, and her mother studies the dragons, and it's sort of like Leila and the Blue Fox with like the scientist element, but this one's in Antarctica, that one's in Norway. And Ember is actually quite pleased with being where she is. At first I think she's a little bit nervous, she doesn't want to leave her dad, but she really quickly finds that she feels at home in Antarctica with the dragons and she can be more herself. She's less closed off until she finds out that the place where she's living is home to this annual dragon hunting event called the Wineglass Hunt, I believe, where these men go out with weapons and kill dragons, shoot them from the sky and try to capture them. And so Ember's trying to stop that. She's such a sweet main character. She is so innocent, but like so badass at the same time and so strong, and she's just such a compelling main character. And the setting of this one is absolutely incredible. I highly recommend this one. It's so good. This next book is actually the second in a series, and I would recommend you read the first one first. However, this second book is the only one in the series that's set in winter. So this is Dead Voices by Katherine Arden. The first book is called Empty Smiles, but it's set in fall during Halloween, and I would recommend that you read them in the time that they're set because it adds to the ambiance of the novels. I actually haven't read the second two because I read the first one in 2024 fall. I read this one in end of November 2024, and then I'm waiting for spring to read the third and then summer to read the fourth. But Dead Voices is genuinely so creepy. When there's a middle grade that's a horror thriller sort of book that's actually scary, I'm kind of flabbergasted because usually I'm not really scared, which is actually the reason why I read a lot of middle grade scary books rather than upper level scary books, because I don't like being scared. But this one genuinely scared me, but I had such a good time. So this book follows Ollie, Coco, and Brian, who are these 3 kids who were in the same school, the same class trip in the last book, and they became best friends because of what they went through there, which I won't get into because I'm not going to spoil it. But now they're going on a skiing trip with their parents, and they get to this resort and the vibes are very off. Nobody else is there. They're the only patrons at this ski resort except besides employees that run it, and it's something feels really off, but there is a gigantic snowstorm on their way there that they barely even make it. On the way there, too, Coco, one of the kids, thinks she sees someone in the road who then is suddenly gone when everybody looks to where she's like screaming and pointing. And so she either thinks she was dreaming or something weird is going on, but nobody really listens to her or believes her because she's this like little tiny girl who is kind of whiny, I guess, so she's not taken seriously. But they get there and all these really mysterious, creepy things start happening. And then there's one other guest who shows up at the hotel, and he just happens to be a ghost hunter, which, you know, that's a little silly, goofy. Like, what are the chances? The only other guest in the hotel is a ghost hunter who helps the kids try and figure out what's going on in this hotel. There's a lot of creepy things going on. And like I said, it's set during a snowstorm, like to the point where the power goes out because there's so much snow. Like the fireplace can't even light because the snow's coming in to the resort. They can't even go skiing because of how treacherous the conditions are. It's very wintry. The next book I have is also one that I read this year, January, and that is The Snow Girl by Sophie Anderson. Another stunningly illustrated book. Oh my god. This is such a beautiful book. This is the UK one from Blackwell's. It is so gorgeous. So This book is a retelling of the Russian fairy tale, The Snow Maiden, which I personally had never heard of before. So this is about a girl who has gone through something really scary that we don't know what it is. And ever since then, she's had a hard time going outside. She doesn't want to see her friends. She doesn't really do anything. She's really withdrawn from the world as a whole. And so her parents take her to her grandfather's farm because her grandfather has had this cough for a really long time. He's been pretty sick and he's not really capable of taking care of all the animals and all the crops on his farm anymore because of his illness. And so the family goes to help him, and the girl, Tasha, is sort of excited because she gets to go see her grandpa. But when she gets there, it's a small farm sort of community, so the neighbors are all pretty tight-knit. They all know each other, so her family, Tasha's family, is constantly saying like, go see your friends, go talk to this person, talk to that person. And she's like, oh, maybe later. She's too scared. She's just very withdrawn from everything and everyone. She doesn't want to get hurt. She doesn't want people to hurt her. She doesn't want to have to feel the panic inside of her. Like, she's very, very scared. When she tries to do something, she'll have a panic attack. And so one day there's a snowstorm and she and her grandfather are out playing in the snow, and they build a snowman, a snow girl actually. So they build a snow girl, and her grandfather says, take this scarf and put it on her and then make a wish. And whatever you wish for will come true. And so Tasha wishes that this snow girl will come to life. That's her wish. And then she wakes up the next morning and the snow girl and the scarf, it's gone. My favorite part of this book was definitely the illustrations. The illustrations really add to the snowy, cold ambiance. And I apologize, I can't remember where exactly this book is set, but it's somewhere cold and snowy. This is another book similar to Leila and the Blue Fox, although I liked Leila better, but where the main character sort of faces her trauma and moves forward with her life, and it's really, really beautifully done in that regard. This next book I have is Moominland Midwinter. And this is such a cute story. If you know the Moomins, this is one of the Moomin books by Tove Jansson. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if I'm not. I love this edition also so much. This is about the Moomins, and Moomins are this created character. They're not real creatures. They look like this little guy. Where is he? There he is. That's a Moomin, the little white guy. So the Moomins hibernate during winter, but for some reason this one specific Moomin woke up during winter and he's very confused, and he goes outside and he's like, what's going on? What is this white stuff on the ground? Why is it so cold? And he's essentially discovering winter, and it's so sweet and beautiful. And he's asking all these questions and trying to figure out what's going on because he's not usually awake during winter. He's never seen it before. This one is so, so, so cute. And then the last middle grade I have is Greenglass House. This is a book that I think I want to reread to try again, because when I read it, I wasn't paying a super large amount of attention to it. This is a book about Greenglass House, which is an inn that's usually pretty quiet during the winter time, but this one year somebody rings the bell and comes as a guest, and then again and again and again, and suddenly there's all these guests, and it's a mystery, and the main character Milo has to figure out what's going on. I can't tell you much more than that. I do remember that the winter scenery in this is very, very luscious and beautiful, and I really do love an inn. I love a hotel. I love a mystery, so it is a fun time. But again, I really want to reread this one, and there's several other books in this series as well, so that's exciting too. Lots on the horizon to read. So that's the end of the middle grade section. Next, we've got the YA section. Midnight in Everwood is a book that many people hate. I personally love it. Maybe it's because I read this before the Nutcracker, although I also didn't like the Nutcracker that much. This I really loved. I thought the writing was really, really beautiful. I think some people feel it's a little bit too purple, but I personally did not. I thought it was very, very good. This is about Marietta. She's a ballerina. She is sort of coming to the end of her career. At her last performance, this toy maker, Dr. Drosselmeyer, comes in to town, and he's building the set, but he's got some not good intentions, and Marietta accidentally gets pulled into this world of snow and ice, and it's very, very beautiful setting. I love the setting. I think maybe that's why I love the book so much. The writing, I personally thought, was not too much. I thought it was gorgeous. And the snowy landscape was absolutely stunning. And now that I've read the Nutcracker, I do see the comparison between the two and how this is a retelling, but you don't really need to know the Nutcracker to have a good time in this book. The next recommendation I have is a book I read a long time ago. I read this book for the first time in February 2013 when I was still in high school, so I don't fully remember it. So this is one of them that is set sort of during Christmas time, and it's more of like a YA romance, YA contemporary sort of book rather than like being specifically a winter book. But the setting is really, really cute and wintry, and the story, I remember the story being really cute too. Oh, and this is written by Stephen Edmond, and this is sort of a combination, like graphic novel slash regular novel, because there's like these graphics and these illustrations in it. Every chapter has like something like this, like a sort of comic strip, and it's a very fun wintry story. This is about Evan, who's sort of like Ivy League bound. He's very smart, very sort of pretentious, honestly, and his best friend Lucy was like him as well, but she moves and then she changes completely, and now she's sort of goth. She got this goth vibe going on, and Evan is determined over Christmas break when she comes home to figure out what happened to her. Essentially, like what happened to her, you know. But it's a sweet story. I remember it being a nice, sweet story. I really enjoyed it. The next recommendation I have for you is A Castle in the Clouds by Kerstin Gier. This is another story that takes place around Christmas time, but it's not a Christmas novel by any means. This is one of those books that I have a hard time shelving on my bookshelves because I can't really tell what genre it is, because it's definitely like a contemporary YA, but it also has a mystery aspect to it. So I'm like, is it contemporary? Is it mystery? I don't know. But it's very cozy, to say the least. Like, it's a very cozy novel. This is about Sophie Spark, who is working at this really, really upscale fancy hotel during Christmas, New Year's, that sort of season. At this hotel, at her job, she's a maid. She's also like a babysitter. She just has like a lot of odd jobs around the hotel, and she lives in the hotel as well. And she keeps coming up against a lot of like really strange and sort of silly, goofy, but in a very fun, cozy kind of way, situations where she's sort of she's struggling, she's kind of having a hard time with everything going on. And then she finds herself caught up in this mystery, and she has to sort of figure it out before it's too late, before the event at this fancy hotel for New Year's Eve gets messed up. It's a really fun book, and there's a lot of snowy parts, especially the very beginning has this like really fun snowy scene where she's searching for this child that she's babysitting, these children. It's so funny. The next book I have is called Message Not Found by Dante Medema. This book is on this list because it's set in Alaska. I believe it's Alaska. And it is very cold and wintry and snowy. You can see the mountains like behind her. Actually, if you look closely, you can see that one of the mountains is the face of a girl, because this is a story of grief. It's about a main character named Bailey who recently lost her best friend Vanessa. Her best friend Vanessa died, and that's why it's called Message Not Found, because she's like trying to communicate with Vanessa, but she can't get through because she's not alive anymore. And this book is really solely like about a girl coping with an unexpected grief, and I thought it was really well done. A good portrayal of grief that kind of takes you by surprise, and really quite beautiful too. This next book is one you've likely heard of, called Let It Snow by John Green, Maureen Jansson, and Lauren Myracle. This has become a Netflix movie, I believe, which I've actually never seen. It's been on my list for a while. This is another one I haven't read since 2013, so I don't fully remember the plot that well. But this is another one sort of set around Christmas time, and this actually might be one of like the biggest Christmassy ones on this list, but it's called Let It Snow, and it's set during a snowstorm, so you know it has to go on the list. It just has to. But this is a book about 3 people who sort of coincidentally happen to meet up over a course of 3 days, I believe, during a snowstorm where people are sort of stuck in their house because of how bad the snowstorm is, but these 3 people venture out into the snowy wilderness, cold town, and sort of meet up. It's definitely romantic. It's got a lot of romance elements in it. I remember really liking this. Of course, I was like 17 when I read it, but I would like to read it again to see how I really felt. But maybe instead of reading it again, I'll watch the movie, because I am curious about the movie. When I was 17, I was a huge John Green fan. I have every single book. I've read several of them several times. That's all the YA books. The second to last section I have to share with you is my classic section. So I do have 4 classics here. Let's talk about my favorite one first, and that is The Ice Palace by Tarjei Vesaas. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that name. This book is incredible. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Also, look at this edition. Beautiful. So this book is about Sis and Un, and they're new friends, and Un has a secret, and she promises she's gonna tell Sis, and then she disappears. And Sis is convinced that she's disappeared into this ice palace, and the ice palace exists within this frozen waterfall. And the day after Un promises to tell Sis her secret, and then Un disappears. Sis is exploring these frozen waterfalls and she's searching everywhere for Un, and the whole town is searching for Un. I feel like that description doesn't do justice to how absolutely stunningly beautiful this book is. It's so simple and yet extremely profound, and the way that the ice and the waterfall and the ice palace and childhood innocence and trauma and all of these different themes are wrapped up so neatly in such a beautifully majestic way. This is such a stunning novel. I highly recommend it. It's not a difficult classic. If you're reticent to start it because of the fact that it's a classic, don't be, because it's very understandable. The translation, at least in this specific edition, is wonderful. Next I have Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome, which I read in December of 2024. I really like this book, and I'm actually surprised by how much I liked it, just because, I don't know, it just didn't really seem like it would be my thing besides the fact that it's set in winter. So Ethan Frome is about Ethan Frome. He lives in New England, and this is set during New England winter, so you know it's freezing cold. And Ethan's wife is a hypochondriac, and she's kind of annoying, and he's not really happy with his wife, but you know, he tolerates her. So when his wife's cousin, and I think her name is Maddie, says that she can come and help out around the house, Ethan and his wife Zena take her up on it pretty quickly because they really do need help around the house. I mean, they're not very well off. Ethan is having a hard time with work because he has to take care of his wife, and his wife can't do anything. She can't make money. So they invite the cousin to come and stay with them and help around the house, and Ethan falls into this deep obsession with her. And this book, it'll tear your heart out. It'll tear your heart right out of your chest because it is so sad. The end is just so heartbreaking, and the beginning is heartbreaking. The whole thing is just sad. It's just a sad time, but I thought it was written really beautifully, and of course the snowy New England winter is so wonderfully done. It's a really good classic. Next I have, this is a book that is set in winter, but winter has really nothing to do with the plot, and this is The Door by Magda Szabo. This is the first Magda Szabo I've ever read, and I read it in January. I read it this month, and I loved this book so much. It is so enticing and interesting and keeps your attention from page one. It's just so good. And I actually had this on my shelf for a very long time before I picked it up, and I don't know what made me pick it up, but it is set fully or partly in winter. But this is a story that follows our main character Magda, who is, I think, based off the author. I'm not totally sure, don't quote me on that. And Magda and her husband have this neighbor who's like sort of the community mystery. Nobody really knows much about her. Nobody is allowed inside of her home, and she's old, but she's constantly moving, constantly working. She's so fast on her, she's just light on her feet, and everybody's enamored by this woman Emrance. And Emrance becomes Magda and her husband's like sort of housekeeper, and they just have a very strange dysfunctional relationship, Magda and Emrance, and we just follow the relationship and what goes on and what happens. And this is set around a little bit after World War II, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Don't quote me on that because I could be wrong, but Emrance is working and she's shoveling snow outside every single day in front of like everybody's home, and she's raking the leaves in the fall. And I just thought that a lot of the scenery when Emrance is outside working is really very wintry. That's why I put this book on the list. I don't know, people might disagree with having this book on the winter book recs list, but this is such a wonderful story. I highly recommend. If you've been thinking about picking this one up, this is another one. Pick this up. It is so incredible, and the end, just like, it was like a punch to the gut, and like you can tell what's gonna happen towards the end as the story progresses, but it still hurts. It's so painful. It's so good. And then the last classic I have on this list is one that I'm a little bit less familiar with. I read it in a day in 2021, I think, and so I don't fully remember the plot, so I'm gonna read to you what the back of the book. And this is Ice by Anna Kavan. In a frozen apocalyptic landscape, destruction abounds. Great walls of ice overrun the world, and secretive governments vie for control. Against this surreal yet eerie familiar broken world, an unnamed narrator embarks on a hallucinatory quest for a strange and elusive glass girl with silver hair. He crosses icy seas and frozen plains, searching ruined towns and ransacked rooms, desperate to free her from the grips of a tyrant known only as the Warden, and save her before the ice closes all around. A novel unlike any other, Ice is at once a dystopian adventure shattering the conventions of science fiction, a prescient warning of climate change and totalitarianism, a feminist exploration of violence and trauma, a speculative literary dreamscape, and a brilliant allegory for its author's struggles with addiction, all crystallized in prose, glittering as the piling snow. I want to reread this because I don't fully remember what happens in it. I remember being slightly bored, but that premise just is incredible. The last section of this video is solely just the books for winter that I have on my physical TBR. One of them I'm actually missing. I don't know where it went, but I'll still tell you about it because I did own it at one point and I'm gonna buy it someday when I'm ready to read it. But that's the book I'll just start with. And again, I'm not going to tell you like descriptions of these books because we really got to get this, we got to wrap this puppy up. But first book is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Second book is Whiteout by Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon, and Danielle Clayton and Tiffany D. Jackson and Nick Stone. Lots of authors for Whiteout. I started this one but then put it down for a while, just wasn't in the mood for it, but I am looking forward to picking it back up. It feels very like John Green-esque, like kind of like Let It Snow. Next book I have is Rock Crystal by Adalbert Stifter. That's quite the name. I'm very, very excited. This is like really top priority TBR at the moment. This book I'm currently reading, and it's The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I'm not very far though. I'm only on page 36, but it's good so far. Then I have The Enchanted Sonata by Heather Dixon Walwork. Winter by Allie Smith. Another one that I've started and put down just temporarily because I wasn't in the mood, but that's The Snow Child by Ewan Ivy. This one was so good so far, and I really need to be in the perfect mood for it because I just really need to appreciate it for what it is because it was so beautifully written and I only read a couple chapters. And then lastly I have Migrations by Charlie McConaughey. I got pretty far into this, 82 pages, but it's really dark. It's very beautiful and wonderful and just it's a great book, but it's so dark and I just wasn't in the mood at the time for such a dark story. So I will return to this one as well. But anyway, that concludes our winter book recommendations. If you stayed the entire video, that's crazy. Like, you're amazing. Thank you so much. This is a long video. I hope you got some good recommendations out of this video. Please leave in the comments your favorite winter books, what you're currently reading. Let me know what you're currently reading. Anyway, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!